Good day, sir. I'm Wazili Sikip-Kipan Biskim 2C, and I will read the following topics such as 7. Guides in the photographing crime scenes. A. Series of the photographs of the crime scene. B. The depicted object in the photograph should not be immaterial or irrelevant. 8. The kinds of photographs to be taken at the scene. A. The photograph of the deceased showing the relationship of the dead body with the surroundings, especially the physical evidence. B. Photographs of the evidence showing possible entry, destroyed padlocks, broken doors and windows, and other relevant signs of disturbances. 9. The use of special photography, such as infrared, ultraviolet, orthostereoscopy, macrophotography, photomicrography, movie, camera, etc. B. Photography of environs. C. Close-up photographs of the wound of the dead body after removal from the scene. 10. Sketching the crime scene. A. Sketch defined. It is the graphic representation of the scene of the crime with complete measurements of the relative distances of relevant object and condition obtaining therein. B. The general kinds of sketch. 1. Rough sketch. It is made by the investigator at the crime scene, which is full of important details but without the scale of proportion. This is used as the basis for the finished sketch. 2. Finished sketch. This is a sketch with a scale of proportion and drawn by a draftsman. The rough sketch and the finished sketch are for courtroom presentation. 11. The special kinds of sketches. Sketch of locality. It deals with the crime scene in relation to the environs to include neighboring buildings, structures, or means of access leading to the scene. This kind of sketch is applied in conflagrations suspected to be arson, indicating the origin of the fire and how it spread naturally or unnaturally against the wind. B. Sketch of the ground. This is the kind of sketch which illustrates the scene of the crime with the nearest physical surroundings, such as the room adjacent or opposite the room of the crime scene, the number of floors of a building or house, the yard, and other natural structures. C. Sketch in details or cross-projection view or the exploded view. It describes the immediate scene only, especially inside a room, as the scene of the crime. The room is treated as the cardboard box where the sides and cover collapse to the same plane as the bottom. The bottom serves as the floor, the four sides representing the walls and the cover representing the ceiling. The pieces of evidence found on the floor, walls, and ceiling are depicted or drawn with the respective measurements with reference points such as bullet holes, splatters of blood, and other pertinent data. 12. The elements of the sketch. Measurement. Measurements of space and distance of relevant object to their point of reference. Example, the distance of loaded pistol to the body of the victim and the nearest wall. Points to reference must always be on 2 points to give the exact location of the object by way of the latitude and longitude. The room area must be measured by the width and length together with the height of the walls, the size of the door, and the direction of its wings. B. Compass direction. A standard arrow to indicate the north direction. To find the north without compass, determine the east where the sun rises facing east. Your left side is north direction. C. Essential items. All items in the scene must be included. Never decide outright that some items are irrelevant. As you proceed in the investigation, these seemingly irrelevant items will become irrelevant or material in the investigation. D. Scale of proportion. It is an element of the finished sketch. This is not an element of the rough sketch. It is the proportion of the finished sketch to the actual size or measurement at the scene. The scale of 150 means that 1 inch in the sketch measurement is 50 inches in the actual scene measurement. A. Legend. This is usually placed at the bottom of sketch outside the sketch of the scene. The objects of the crime scene are represented by numbers or letters in order not to unnecessarily crowd the graphic presentation. Their description are found in the legend. Example, the number 3 is the sketch explained in the legend is a pistol Cal 45 is in 1234 loaded in the chamber with 5 rounds of cartridges in the magazine. F. Title. This is the portion of the sketch to identify the particular case by the name of the victim, the exact address of the scene, the date and the time of occurrence, the time of the preparation of the sketch, and the name and signature of the sketcher. 13. Collection, marking, tagging, and preservation of the evidence. Collection. Evidence is collected. It is individually marked with the initials of the investigator. The marking tool depends upon the nature of the evidence. If it is hard objects such as metals, the initials are scratched or engraved by the use of sharp-pointed steel, which is called stylus. B. Marking. Every collected evidence is marked if they are of the same class or type, such as 45 caliber fired empty shells. They are marked consecutively, such as RMB1, RMG2, RMG3, and so forth and so on. evidence which by their nature could not be marked on Earth's surface, such as blood, hairs, fibers, are placed in the plastic container where that container is being marked. Tagging. Every piece of evidence that is collected and marked must be tagged. A card is attached by a string to the evidence with the proper entry of identification and description together with the reference to the specific case. D. Preservation. Perishable material should be preserved by the way or the methods of preservation in order that they will reach the court in the same physical condition as when they were collected from the crime scene. This is the work of laboratory technician. 14. Chain of custody. Define it is the number of persons who handled and possessed the pieces of evidence the moment that they were collected, marked, and tagged up to the time to the final disposition of the case. The basic rule is to limit the chain of custody to avoid tampering, substitution, or loss. If the evidence needs laboratory examination, the investigator must be submit direct to the laboratory without delegating it to the other persons. The submissions is accompanied by a written request and to be officially received by the receiving officer of the laboratory. The receipt must have the legible identification of the receiver together with his signature, time, and date of receipt. If the evidence requires no laboratory examination, it must be submitted to the evidence custodian duty receipt. 15. Methods of marking specific kinds of evidence. A. Guns. Revolver must be marked separately on the frame, but cylinder, barrel, and stock for rifles, they should be marked on the barrel, frame, bolt, or slide. All magazines and accessories shall also be marked. B. Revolver cylinder. Aside from the mark on the cylinder, the chamber facing the firing pin must be marked as soon as it is open for examination. A drawing must depict the chambers facing the firing pin, the respective position of the fired empty shells, misfired or dead cartridges. A detailed examination on the respective position of this evidence could make or unmake a claim of self-defense. The posterior face of the cylinder must also be depicted in the sketch to show the respective position of the smoke rings therein. Each chamber containing a fired empty shell would exhibit his smoke rings at the posterior portion of the chambers. When there is discrepancy, the investigator must look for the answer. The revolver may have been touched or tampered. The direction of the rotation of the cylinder must also be sketched and noted. Colt revolvers have clockwise direction of rotation of the cylinder. Smith and Wesson revolvers have counterclockwise direction of cylinder rotation. C. Fired empty shells, misfired cartridges. Strictly, regulations say they must be marked inside the mouth in cases of fired empty cartridges. It is nearly impossible to mark them inside the mouth, especially 22 caliber shells, but they could be marked on the side of the body of the shells, not on the base. D. Bullets or slugs. They can be marked on the ogive or nose, avoiding the land and groove marks. They could also be marked on the base. F. Reconstructing the crime. Reconstructing the crime defined it is the assessment made by the investigator after the crime scene investigation of how the crime is committed. 2. Kinds of reconstructing the crime. A. Physical reconstruction. Reconstructing the crimes is based on the physical appearance of the crime scene, mainly focused on the pieces of physical evidence and the accounts of witnesses and suspects. B. Mental reconstruction. Based on the physical reconstruction, some conclusion could be formulated taking into account all available pieces of evidence. G. Development of theories. Theory defined it is the imaginative contemplation of reality, direct intellectual apprehension inside or body of generalization and principles developed in association with a practice in a certain field of activity. 2. The need of investigator theory. If there are no witnesses to the commission of the crime, the investigator is left with the physical evidence to formulate how is crime committed. In his formulation, he will form theories to guide his future actions. The investigator must begin the simplest theory of how the crime was committed and by whom and what motive. He may have more than one theory depending upon the unique circumstances of every case. He will proceed in formulation of theories from the simplest to the most complex. As the investigator progresses in the investigation and begins in the simplest theory, he will discard one by one the theories he formulated as the evidence warrants until he is focused in a single theory to guide him to conclude his investigation. The investigator should never disclose his theory to the press because in so doing, he will open himself to unsavory cross-examination by the defense counsel when the case is finally brought before the court for trial. The investigator should not immediately jump to the most complex theory because experience proves that this is destructive. To illustrate this point, take a case of a rich man standing outside the gate of his house and a passers-by shot him several times, all the bullets hitting the area of his genitals to the ordinary investigator, he will jump immediately to the conclusion that the shooting incident is a crime of passion. Thus, he will harass the victim's known enemies, present and the past associates and other persons perceived to be an enemy of the victim. He will now go to the press to publish this theory, and his action is all focused to support his theory. But in the end of the investigation, the motive of killing is just simple thrill killing, and the suspect did not by design intended to land all his bullets on the victim's genitals but was just an accident. The investigator then is rebuffed and embarrassed by his own rashness. Worse, he will cross-examined by the defense counsel about this published theory, which is very foreign to the movie. This is happening to our present investigators. They overly expose themselves to the press for nothing that is concrete. H. Failed inquiry. Failed inquiry defined it is general questioning of all persons at near around the crime scene. 2. When to start the field inquiry. The moment that the investigator set foot at the crime scene, he must immediately conduct the general questioning of all persons present treat, or he may assign his assistant or any members of the investigating team. Most often, the members of the Mobile Patrol Bureau who arrived at the scene earlier had already conducted the field inquiry and have in their custody the witnesses and or the suspects. The investigator should not stop here but conduct further field inquiry at the remaining people or those who will arrive at the scene. 3. How to treat witnesses and suspects retained at the scene. The witnesses and or suspects retained at the crime scene shall be immediately transported to headquarters with the basic guidelines that they should not talk with each other during the trip and should be immediately separated with each other upon arrival at the station. 4. The purpose of separating the witnesses or suspects from one another. The purpose why there is need to separate each witness from the other, and which applies also to suspects, is to preserve the independence of their respective accounts about the commission of the crime. Going back to the crime scene. Number 1. Reasons for going back to the crime scene. In some instances, crime are committed during nighttime and the investigator arrives at the scene at daytime due to late discovery or delayed report about the commission of a crime. The investigator back to the scene at the exact time when the crime occurred in order to see for himself the order of things of that precise moment. His notes of concern shall be lightning conditions, the distance of normal visibility, the volume of pedestrian and vehicle traffic, and other things and conditions relevant to his investigation. The reason is that during the progress of investigation, no matters may crop up which may be inadvertently considered irrelevant during the crime scene investigation, does not need to go back to values of the process. Having first personal knowledge of these facts, he could use them to confront lying, exaggerated, or half-truth narrations of witnesses and the admission and confession of the suspects. These are potent tools against wayward confessions or admissions. J. The 3 phases of the criminal investigation. Number 1. The identification of the criminal. Number 2. The criminal is traced, located, and arrested. And last, number 3, the facts or evidence to prove his guilt are gathered from the introduction during trial. K. The 4 methods of identifying the criminals. Number 1. By confession or admission. 2. By accounts or testimonies of witnesses. 3. By circumstantial evidence. 4. By associative evidence. L. The two kinds of criminal for purposes of identification by witnesses. 1. Non-fugitives. The criminals are known by names and other personal circumstances by the witnesses even before the commission of the crime. 2. Unknown fugitives. These kinds of the criminals are unknown to the witnesses by names and other personal circumstances before the commission of the crime. Although some of these criminals are identified by witnesses through their photograph in the rogue galleries and other sources, they are classified as unknown fugitives. In some past experience, the witnesses had identified these kinds of criminals through their photographs, yet they could not identify them in person during the police lineup. Factors affecting positive identification. Number 1. The ability of witnesses to positively identify the unknown criminals depends upon his level of alertness, intelligence, vision, age, and health. Number 2. The prevailing condition of visibility and observation at the crime scene. 3. The lapse of time between the commission of the crime and the arrest of the offender. 4. The opportunity of the crime to vary his personal appearance, such as the removal of mustache, sideburns, goatee, the change of hairstyle, the addition of tattoos on the face, earrings, nose rings, lip rings, or face lip through surgery. Number 1. M. Methods of identification by witnesses. Number 1. Verbal description. This is the physical description of the unknown fugitive by witnesses based on the extent and range of their perception. Rogues Gallery. These are the police files of photograph of known criminals. These photographs may be directly taken by the police or those gathered from other sources to form part of police gallery. 3. General photographs. The investigator should show to the witnesses a variety of photographs which does not necessarily represent the criminal in order to the witnesses to approximate the nearest description of unknown fugitives. The pictures about the degree of baldness, shape of nose or face, scars will help the witnesses to arrive at a clear description. 4. Cartographic sketch. It is the composite representation reduced to a drawing of the suspect face made by an artist and based on the description furnished by the witnesses. It is done by showing to the witness a chart containing representation of different types of the human features as the shape of the face, nose, eye, lips, ears, and others. The witness then select from this chart and the artist reduces into a drawing as an approximate facial image of the unknown criminal. And the police lineup. Police lineup define it is the process of identification by witness of the unknown fugitive who is mixed with the innocent persons lined before the witnesses. 2. Procedures of police lineup. A. For one suspect to be mixed with the innocent persons, the lineup must be at least be composed of 7 persons to 10 persons. This increases when there are 2 or more suspects mixed with innocent persons for identification. B. The appearance of those composing the lineup must be approximately the same as to height, belt, complexion, hairstyle, clothing, each. C. The witness should be instructed before entering the lineup room about the presence of the suspects. D. The suspects must be given the opportunity to select their position in the lineup. A. The lineup members are not allowed to talk during the process of make any movement which may suggest the identity of the suspects. F. The investigator should not talk or move which may indirectly identify the suspect. The power of suggestion should always be avoided. G. The proceedings must be covered by detailed report and possibly by a movie camera for court representation. O. Center points of physical identification. Number 1. Face. Shape: square, round, oval, rectangular, heart-shaped, trapezoid, invested trapezoid, and other appropriate descriptions such as the presence of scars, moles, birthmarks, etc. B. Forehead. C. Eyebrow. D. Mustache, sideburns, or gout. E. Eyes. Deep-seated, bulging, regular, chinky, etc. F. Ears. Regular, bulging, scope shape. G. Cheeks. Deep, pointed cheekbone, round H. Nose. Aquiline, pug, regular, wide, big nose, etc. Mouth. Small, long, round. Jaw. Square, regular, deep, prominent, etc. Lips. Thick, thin, tight, arc upward or downward, etc. Teeth. Missing, yellow, reddish, big, small, etc. Chin. Receding, protruding, cleft, etc. 2. Hairs. Curly, straight, short, crop, long, futic, or bushy, kinky, afro type, etc. 3. Neck. Short, long, round, submerged, etc. 4. Shoulder. Broad, regular, heavy, narrow, etc. 5. Waist. Rotund, small, regular, bulging, etc. 6. Hands. Tattooed. Location. Long, short, muscular, thin, scars, birthmarks, moles, etc. Fingers. Missing, extra number, short, long, fat, regular, etc. 8. Manner of walking. Limping, amputate, left or right or degree, whether up to the knee, ankle bone, or others. Voice. Baritone, tenor, slow, loud, womanish, accent, barking, hoarse, stuttering, broken, etc. 10. Physical appearance. Hispanic. B. American. C. Caucasian. D. Asian. D. Negroid. 11. Complexion. Brown, tan, light fair, white, black, dry skin, coarse, sweaty, or other appropriate description. P. The physical evidence to identify the criminal kinds of the criminal. 1. Kinds of physical evidence. Corpus delicti. These are the object or substances which constitute the essential parts of elements of the commission of the crime. It is sometimes called the body of the crime, not the body of the victim. The cause of death is one of the essential elements of a crime. B. Associative evidence. Pieces of the evidence which will link the suspect to the crime scene, as fingerprints, foot, or shoe impressions are some of the example. C. Tracing evidence. Article which assists the investigator in locating the criminal stolen in the position of the suspect is the example. Q. Observation and care of evidence. Number 1. Purpose. In order that the evidence gathered at the crime scene shall have the same substantial condition when they will be presented before the court during trial, thus care must be exercised to avoid tampering, destruction, or substitution of the physical evidence. 2. Marking. The purpose of marking is for a positive and definite identification during trial. The investigator is required to identify the pieces of evidence during the trial of the case. In some instances, drug cases were dismissed due to failure of the investigator to identify where sachet of drug was the subject of drug pushing from the sachet of drug subject to position. R. Modus operandi. Modus operandi is defined simply it is the method of the operation by a specific criminal or criminal syndicates. It is established by a series of crime under one classification. The modus operandi of one criminal is distinct and different from the other. It is a criminal trademark, logo, or brand name. Examples are the use of junior-sized crowbar in residential robberies, cooking and eating at the kitchen of the victim during the robbery, leaving human excreta on the rugs of victim house, or destroying a roof sheet to gain entry on the residence. These are but few examples. 2. Importance of modus operandi. A. It is one of the most useful means of identifying unknown fugitives. Thus, every investigation unit should maintain a modus operandi file. B. For use of security education programs of citizenry, over the radio or television programs, or in seminars about safety education. Thank you, sir.